Hey, Lord of the Rings fans, New Better Do Better here, back with another episode. In fact, when you reach a little milestone, you're supposed to say, "Hey, this is a milestone." That milestone was reached about 10 episodes back when we were at episode 50. Now we're at episode 60. So
Yeah.
I'm catching up with myself here. Episode 60 of Voices of Arda. Shout out to my co-host, the one, the only, Callie Cosplay. What up, Callie?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode. We have something very fun, I think, lined up for you today.
Very fun, very cool. Very, very new in the sense of like the type of people that we have on, usually are fans and they do this, they do that. But this person right here is a teacher and they teach, which I love because I teach,
Yes,
but
you do.
Mhm.
they got some credentials, you know what I'm saying? So, Callie, introduce our guest, please, to the podcast.
So today we have Elise who runs Teaching with Magic, which I am sure you have seen pop up on your TikToks and your Instagram. She teaches children, right?
I do.
From what, yeah,
Actually, like children and adults, actually.
and adults.
Mostly,
Okay,
Okay.
most
okay.
I'm credentialed to teach children, and sometimes adults like to listen to me talk too, but
Yes,
that's
That's
where I
yes.
got the
amazing.
degree.
That's great. But yeah, so she's a teacher by profession, and
Nice.
it has a lot of passion. I have just really enjoyed all of her posts all along. They're full of
Thanks.
humor and just full of energy. And she did a reading this past weekend for a charity live stream that we were all helping with.
Yes.
And she read The Hobbit in Gollum's voice, and it was the
Oh,
most fun thing in the world. Oh my goodness. Like
Oh
she
my
just
God.
kicked that off so strong. And it was amazing. I loved it. She is magic at teaching. It is teaching with magic,
yes.
Elise.
What's up?
Hi. Thanks for
What's going
having
on?
me, guys.
Well, thanks for being on. We love people who are like obsessed with the culture and the fandom like us, and people who I for one, people who can teach it and who like want other people to understand the love that we have for it, or get
Mhm.
young people into it, and can equate it to other things, and vice versa, and make it fun, like reading in
Mhm.
Gollum's voice. That is phenomenal. So I love it. Love what you're doing. You got me. You had me at hello.
I forgot
Thank
I forgot
you.
to ask my question, which is why was the teacher wearing sunglasses inside? Because the class was so bright.
I love it. The class was so bright. That's
Very
good though,
bright.
because that's what you want out of a class.
Absolutely.
You want a bright class, you want a curious class. You don't want a class with that like comes in with all the answers. You want a class that's willing to go and find the answers. And
That's
that's what I
right.
try to do with my teaching anyway. I try to think of myself more as a facilitator. Like
Mm.
KnewBetta, you have like an encyclopedia in your brain when it comes to Lord of the Rings and Arda. I do not have an encyclopedia in my brain. Some people say, like, hey, you're an expert, you can talk about this. And I'm like, I couldn't tell you the five F's in the houses of Fingon or Finway. Like, I don't have that encyclopedic knowledge, but I do know how to like go and look it up. I know how to try and reach that answer. And that's what I try to do with my students. Um,
Which there's nothing wrong with that process. Everybody
nah,
absorbs different and everybody teaches differently. You know what I'm saying? Like
exactly.
even when you're a teacher, it doesn't mean you gotta off the cuff on your brain know everything. And I'm great with certain things, but there are things that I double check like all the time just to make sure. Like
Yeah.
I might think I know it, and then I'm like, oh, this date is not 100%, which is nothing wrong with that because fundamentally I know about it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like I know what's going on. Let me. There's nothing wrong with double checking yourself and or whatever the case may
Absolutely.
have you,
Absolutely.
or
Yeah.
using a source, a reference guide. That's what the book is
Yeah.
anyway.
Exactly. That's
So
pretty much
literally,
what it is.
that's what the book
And
is.
that's the best part of it is that there are so many different entry points and so many different places that you can be an expert in when it comes to Tolkien that it's fun to just give my kids at least the whether it's my kids or my adult classes the entry points to finding that information. Like there
Mhm.
are times when a student will ask me a question and I'll say, you know what, I don't know, but let's go find it together. So usually the appendices is the first place that I'll go to find an answer, or I'll go to unfinished tales. Like a lot of my students don't even know that the unfinished tales exist. Like they know
Yeah.
about the
Mm.
Hobbit and they know about the Lord of the Rings, because of the films or because like that's where their parents have first set them on the journey. But then they're like, oh, hey, there's an entire Bible here called the Silmarillion, and there's
Why is
letters.
there ever? Yeah.
I know. It's like I had one student like 12 years old, and she's like, yeah, my dad read me the Silmarillion as a bedtime story. And I'm like,
Oh.
okay, that's a
So
bedtime story.
should we be concerned?
She's like, no, he read me like the calm stuff at first, and then as I got
Okay,
older, then
I was like, wow.
I'm
There's
like,
some
wow.
places
okay.
that I might skip for a 12-year-old
I definitely wouldn't have gone with the
audience.
Battle of Unnumbered Tears as a bedtime story for my child,
Two in
but
Jerumbar, I may have
Yeah,
skimmed
that's
over
true.
that. And he
yeah.
lived happily ever after,
Oh
lying.
yeah, he totally lives happily ever after. Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
It's fine.
Kelligor
Good.
McCurfin just wanted to hug Luthien.
Oh yeah, no, totally. But good boy Huon, never forget. She's like, I
Yeah,
love good boy
you gotta
Huon.
put Huon in there.
Yes.
Huon
That's right.
whooped on
Yeah.
Sauron's butt.
Says
So they
okay,
say.
but-
Yes.
I
Yes.
still
So
say he was
do your
drunk.
students come to you specifically to learn Lord of the Rings material, or is that like a bonus thing that they get just
It
by taking one of
depends
your
on what I'm
classes?
offering. Like I teach full time at a school. I teach history and English and skills for dyslexic readers. So all of my students are either dyslexic or have some form of language based learning disability. So I have to adapt instruction in order to meet those needs. And then whether it's through a club. Before I got this job, I also did some homeschooling classes for a bit. So I offered Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit as like a club option for kids, homeschooling students to sign up for, kind of like Signum or Signum Academy, where I offered the subject and they signed up.
Yeah.
And then it kind of grew from there for a little bit. So it depends on like what setting I'm in at the moment. But it really works out because when they choose to come to me, they're like, hey, I have some form of knowledge, or I want to watch the films, but my parents need me to read the books first. And I'm like, get that. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, there are some parents who are like, no, you got to read the books first before you watch the films, which was funny because for me, that was the complete opposite when I was growing up. I wanted to see the films. My dad was like, no, you're not 13 yet. You're not going to see PG-13 movies. So we'll watch Ralph Bakshi instead. So that was my entryway into Tolkien.
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell people, I think I even said on the last podcast, I had watched the animated Rankin and Bass Hobbit before I actually read the book. I just I had no reference to it.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know what it was when I was watching. I just happened to watch it and I was like, oh,
it's a cool, it's like,
it's a cool thing. It's like, any fantasy thing like Kroll or something, like anything like that. So when I read the book, I didn't connect the two at first. I just was like, so the
like,
book
wait a
was
second, this sounds slightly familiar.
Familiar, I guess, but then I guess it didn't ring a bell. And then the book is so much more enthralling and engaging and funny, and even though I love the animated one, it's just it's a different experience. And so it was wholly singular. It was might as well be something else, but absolutely the animated one captures the essence of it. And so when I rewatched it after reading the book, I appreciated it that much more. And I'm like, oh wow, I love that they put the Goblin Town song in there. I love those things that they did, which I feel like the actual live action Hobbit kind of failed in those places, and they tried to add too much to it, and they convoluted it. No offense to anybody who likes it, because I love that people like it. You know what I'm saying? I just think they just went off course a little bit, and it kind of got away from them.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I loved it. Yeah, I watched like I said, I watched the animated Hobbit first, but just didn't know what I just like, a cartoon, a thing.
Yeah,
it's a cartoon. I didn't know what it was. Yeah, like
I think that's what my dad was thinking of when he found the Bakshi version. I'm not sure if he saw it first, but he's like, hey, it's a cartoon, it's Lord of the Rings, let's watch it. And then lo and behold, there's like Rotoscope, Nazgul, and a Balrog and furry Uggs. So I mean, what are you gonna do, right? And of course, for some reason, Aragorn does not wear pants. I don't know why Aragorn does not wear pants.
Oh, he's living that freeballing life. What do you mean?
I mean, why not? I mean, if you're living in the forest, there's nobody around. You might endlessly
give him crap for that. Yeah, we do.
for a good reason. Yeah. And And it's always funny to see like what my students come in with, like I've got a student right now who has read the Silmarillion cover to cover, who has read Lord of the Rings cover to cover. He's got like a special edition Lord of the Rings illustrated by Tolkien that he brings. Like this is like this is a big collector's item, and he brings it to school, and I'm like, buddy, that needs to be in a glass case.
Oh,
Gotta
just in his
protect that thing
backpack
there.
with
You
his
know what I
lunch
mean?
and his juice box.
Exactly.
It's
And
your
like
passion, but you gotta understand, man.
I'm like,
This is like a sacred treasure.
treat it like the Arkenstone. Actually, no, don't treat it like the Arkenstone. Treat it like a
Passing that
Silmaril,
thing around.
like
Yeah.
on a like in a glass case, like Galadriel's hair, in crystal, encased in crystal. But like then I have other kids who are like, I've never experienced this before. Other people have told me about this. So what is the big deal? And with all the new media coming out, like you've got Rings of Power, you've got War of the Rohirrim. They're like, this is a cool thing. How do I get into this? Like, where do I? And half the battle is, where do I even start?
Yeah.
And it's my personal opinion is to start with The Hobbit, just because it's a good like
That is the
entryway.
only opinion. That is the only right opinion. Start with The Hobbit.
I tell
is the
people to
most.
start with Children of Hurin, but apparently I'm
Oh,
wrong.
oh
So.
my. I don't know this person. Just so you know,
That was
at
a
least I
joke.
do
Don't
not
do that.
know
Don't do
this
that. Don't do
person.
that.
I
Start
just
with The
happened to
Hobbit.
stumble across a podcast and it already had a host. And I was like, hey, can I participate? So no.
No.
But yes,
New
The
Beta
Hobbit, of course, we
is
start.
like keeping mom on this. Yeah.
We start with The Hobbit.
Children of
The Hobbit is absolutely the quintessential starting point. It is so fun. It is so complete. It is
It
so
is.
the growth, there's everything in The Hobbit. There's
There is,
everything in
yeah.
the Lord of the Rings, but the tone of the Lord of the Rings is much more serious. So
Yeah.
if you're diving in, everybody might not be ready for that. Whereas
Exactly.
this is a good place to dive in to where it's like, I'm gonna have that fun and it's gonna be silly and it's gonna be stuff like that, but it's still gonna be dead like the war of the battle of the five armies is dead serious. They're not
Exactly.
joking about anything in there. You know what I'm saying? And it's a very serious tone, but it comes from, you know, literally bows out of bond. Like when that happens, like you're laughing your ass off at Bilbo bobbing underwater under the thing. Like it's funny. Like, but it's still he's still doing a great deed. And
He is, yeah.
it's written so well to
It
where
is.
all of it meshes together well. The songs they fit, they make sense. You're like, oh, like you're enthralled with the essence of the elves. You're like, oh, but they're funny. These elves in the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, they're dead serious. They're not joking around about anything.
Emphasis on dead.
Oh, they yeah.
Emphasis on dead.
It just sorry.
Yeah, that was the right thing. That was the right thing to say.
I'm like, it just popped out. Some things just pop out of my mouth, and I don't know where they come from. I'm sorry.
No, that was a very good point right there.
It's
Emphasis
like, but
on
it's
dead.
we think of the elves either as, you know, these silly, diminutive little fairy creatures from the Victorian era that Tolkien hated, or very tall, very serious, very sad. But then you get the Silmarillion, you're like, oh, that's why they're in such a bad mood throughout the Third Age.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
we know the ones that are like, okay, they're in Rivendell in the Third Age prior to the ring being found. They're like, we're chilling, la 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 la, and then when the
We
ring's found, they're
had
like,
our
I'm dead
time.
serious. You can't even come through this land. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even like the dwarves type shit. They are dead serious. But before that, prior to that, you know, like the time of the long peace, they're just literally like tra la 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 down in the valley, and
Exactly.
it's hilarious.
It is. And it's just funny to see like my kids, like they're like, why are we tra-la-la-ling? And I can go into a little bit of like had the background of like how I'll often use that chapter as like an introduction to philology, because they've heard that Tolkien like invented languages, and you don't see too much of that in The Hobbit, other than the Thorin's map. Like you can see those runes.
Yeah, the runes on the sword as well.
True.
But you've also got like hints about Gondolin. You've got hints about like where the swords came from. I know, Gondolin.
That's what hooked me.
That's
what hooked me into this whole thing is when he said the sword is from Gondolin, and I was like, that sounds like the
What's
coolest
Gondolin?
place. on the face of earth. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I
No,
just had to
not at
say
all.
that
But like
because I was
that's
like,
it.
what is
That's
Gondolin?
the entry point. That's the he's like he plants these little nuggets. I think Alan Sisto from Frenzy Pony podcast calls them textual ruins. I don't know if that's a PvP term or if that's like all over, but that's what gets kids curious and they want to know where that came from. And so I'll, part of what I do is I'll say, well, here's what Tolkien did in his day job. Like, this is what he did in real life. He invented languages, he studied ancient languages, and he used those clues from ancient languages to create his own. And then I'll have my students create their own language with different guide points. And I came up with this thanks to James Tauber from Digital Tolkien, because he's a linguist. So, and to rewind a little bit, as a dyslexia educator, I have to teach students how to read and how to write in a very explicit way, because English does have rules. Okay. Yeah. And it's because of Tolkien that I learned this. Tolkien kind of to go full circle, Tolkien made me see like just how interconnected our language really is. And so you start from the basics. What's a word? Give me a word for hello, give me a word for goodbye, give me a word for X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be. Then tell me how to make it plural. How do you get more than one? How do you have more than one noun? Mm-hmm. Like cats, for example. We indicate plurals by adding an S. A morpheme is a unit of meaning. It's a letter, but it's also a unit of meaning. And that's how you make a plural. Like that letter S means more than one. My friend Larry Swain says his favorite morpheme is un, because it literally changes something to the opposite, like Unferth.
Oh, yeah,
our buddy
okay.
Unferth in Beowulf. His name literally means unfriend, as in I ain't your friend. I'm gonna embarrass you in front of King Hrothgar right now. So, with the elves, you get this entry point into philology and how he created Quenya and how he created Sindarin. Then if you go into the appendices, you can look and see like you've got consonants, you've got vowels, you've got different ways to pronounce these consonants and vowels. Mm-hmm. That's how language works in our real world. And it's magically, I don't even know how to describe it, but like magically, I just started making this connection of like, wow, Tolkien's really inspired me to think about language and how to teach dyslexic kids, because with dyslexia, your brain is not translating reading the same way that someone without dyslexia might do. Because if you look at the left hemisphere of your brain, all of this is responsible for language. You've got speech in your frontal lobe, you've got processing speech, and in the back of your brain, in your occipital lobe, yeah, we're getting to brain science here. We're getting crazy. This is your what neurologists call your letterbox. So this is the part of your brain that recognizes the shapes of letters and distinguishes them from other shapes. Then it gets into your parietal lobe and your temporal occipital lobe and starts making meaning out of those sounds. Like, okay, this is a sound. This is what the letter looks like. This is what it means. And it all happens within like the space of a second, like less than a second. And with dyslexic kids, you have to make more connections in that letterbox by showing them over and over. Here's the letter. Here's the sound that goes with it. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it feels like if you trace it. And Tolkien's language and his approach to invented languages really helps me do that. I'm like, okay, so I know that that DH in Galathrim, that makes a specific sound and it means something specific, and it only exists in Sindarin. It doesn't exist in Westron. It doesn't exist in Rohirric. So those are some other fun ways and kids are like, wait, you mean reading isn't magic? Like, I'm not born with this ability to read? I'm like, nah, dude, your brain literally is not built to read. You have to teach it how to read. Yeah. It doesn't just magically come to you. It's not an inherited trait.
I love how, I think exactly what you're saying is true, because there are words that don't exist, right?
Yeah.
And that he makes, but you understand it immediately. So like if we talk about Gondolin, right?
Yeah.
You've heard Gondolin, and it's a made up city, so on and so forth. But when you're reading the Silmarillion, it literally is like, and the Gondolin's room was strong. And you
Mm-hmm.
like, I know that means like the group of them. Like, and I didn't
Exactly.
have to be like, what is that? What is the Gondolin's room? Or like you said, the Galath room. And
Mm-hmm.
the Falath room, the all I know that means those people.
Exactly.
One thing I like, I'm not dyslexic, but the something that helped me like with that, and I always equated it to Tolkien's like writing or his language style
Mm.
and his in those words like Gondor, you know, land of rock or
Yep.
stone was the like taxonomy of animals and how it's either Greek or Latin, and they
Mm-hmm.
take the two and they make it mean something. So when I love to study ancient animals and things like that, and
Yeah.
the making of those names it's very similar to how Tolkien names cities or the meaning of someone's name. It's very similar.
Exactly.
So I would do like Smilodon, deadly knife tooth,
Exactly.
Don meaning tooth, Don meaning teeth. So all those animals like that, then you automatically get it when you see like Megatherium. Therium
Mm-hmm.
means beast, mega means, large beast, mega is large. So megalodon is, large tooth. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Exactly.
crazy. Like, and then you just get it and you're like, okay, Tolkien does the same thing.
He
So you have
does. Yeah.
Gondolin, the music of the rock, and then you have, Gondor is the city of stone, the city of rock. So it's like, oh, okay, Mordor. More is
Exactly.
black. Door is land. Gondor, the black land, the stone land. It's the same thing. Like, so it's like, wow. And I equated to that, and that helped me get those words all the time. So the teaching styles or the learning styles is very important in the understanding your students. And one thing that you're coming across great at is understanding what your students need and then relaying it to them or teaching them in a certain way. And so
Exactly.
I commend you because it's not easy necessarily teaching somebody with dyslexia. It's a learning disability, and you have to make sure that they're getting it because you know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying. I'm not sure of all the different types of it, but I'm sure things could be reversed. Things could be, what I mean, and they learn
Yeah.
just as great as anybody else. It's just a different way. So you just have to find a way
Exactly.
to teach them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There's no one, like, there's a whole, there's a
Different
bunch
bunch
of
of
different
versions,
ways
right?
that dyslexia can present itself. Like the letter reversals is the most like popular one that
Yeah, but
people
there's
seem
other
to
ways.
know
Yep.
about. But it's also something that kids do automatically when they're playing with language, especially at a very young age before they've really learned how to like, and it's just how our brains work because our brains, like when we look in a mirror, we automatically see mirror image of ourselves. Like there's brain science behind that mirror image, and you have to learn how to reverse those letters. You literally teach yourself that there's a difference, knowing the difference between a letter B and a letter D. You have to explicitly teach yourself how to do that because our brains aren't automatically wired to reverse those images. So we have to do that through like what's called multisensory learning. So you have to learn the shape of the letter. So if you look, for me it's a letter B, but it's reversed in the camera. It's probably a letter D for y'all. So you've got the tall base, and then um, you've got the belly behind it. My elementary kids are like, is it a belly or is it a diaper? So with B for belly, you've got the B behind it, you've got the sound, but for diaper, you've also got the D. Even though they look the same, they're reversed depending on which way you're looking at it. And you have to
Hmm.
cement that in your brain. That's really tricky to do. But as you get older, dyslexia can present itself in different ways in that it just takes longer to process the words that are in front of you. And your brain isn't necessarily making the connection between speech and the shape of the letters. So it's reversals are like one tiny bit of it, but it's not the indicator that you're dyslexic. And
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of parents will come out to me, especially when I was teaching early childhood, be like, is my child dyslexic because they're reversing their B's and D's? And I'm like, your child's 3, first of all.
Oh.
You've got some time. You've got a little bit of time. Second of all, that's one way it could be presented, but here are some other traits that might indicate that they're dyslexic as well. But also, wait, like maybe 2 or 3 years before you start getting concerned. It's okay.
It's all right.
Parents, they like, I love parents. They want the best for their kids.
Mm.
But sometimes we worry about, and as a parent myself, I completely understand it. We worry about the wrong things at the wrong time sometimes. And we just got to take a deep breath and be like, okay, it's all good.
Yeah, becoming a
Yeah.
full
Let it
human
be.
is a whole process, and you
It
just got to
really
be
is.
patient.
Yeah, I've
So,
noticed that,
Exactly.
parents tend to want
Exactly.
every kid to develop at the same time, the same rate. And sometimes that's not the case, but it doesn't mean they're not going to develop fully in the same, in the same token. So it's like, at a certain point you want them to be on the same level and everything like that. But like sometimes you got to like, hey, let them
Yeah.
learn this or figure this out, and they'll be
Yeah.
okay, and they'll still be caught up with everyone. It's just they taking a little longer because whatever the case may have you. So it's tough. It's
Exactly.
tough. It's
It's
hard
tough. Like,
to
you want the
gauge.
best for your kids, but you also, like, sometimes you don't know what the best is because everybody's telling you what the best is.
Yeah.
And then other times it's like, okay, so my child can write in runes, and my child can, recite all of the letter F's in Fingolfin and Finway, and all of the treat. Like, there's always there could be a special interest there that your kid loves, but the state or another teacher or somebody else is telling you where they should be. And it's like, what's important to my child's happiness right now? And what do they need? What are the skills they need? Not what's the content that they need. What are the skills that they need in order to be successful, whether it's in their grade level or in college or in real world? Like, when I was growing up, I'm sure you guys could relate that everybody was telling me, you have to go to college. You have to go to college. Like, you don't have a choice. You have to go to college. But then I had other friends who just didn't like school, didn't enjoy school. School was hell for them. So they went to trade school. Now they are perfectly happy and perfectly successful in their trade, and they're making good money in their trade. And what's more, they are happy.
I didn't. I was became more of a distraction to the other kids
Sure.
because I was like, I
That's a real
don't need to
thing.
kind of be here. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would always like
Mm-hmm.
just be good at everything as far as like with the learning thing. So I was like, I felt
Mm-hmm.
like, why am I here? Like, I already know this type
Exactly.
of situation, and I would be such an asshole and distraction to the other kids because of that. And then it took one teacher, I'll never forget. I probably said this on this podcast before, but shout out to Mr. Riley, who recognized that. And he was like, he does not learn the same way. Now I'm worried about being cool because I'm like, why am I wasting my time doing this? And it's not because I was like, why this doesn't make sense
School
to me.
wasn't meeting your needs at the time.
Yeah. And it just didn't make sense. Like, if I could go back, I would do it just because I know it's the best thing to get these, things done. I know that
Yeah.
as an adult, but as a kid, there's no way you're
No.
conveying that like it to every kid. Every kid's not going to have that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So it just didn't work out like that. But he
Totally.
saw how I learned and how I participated and what I needed, and he taught me that way, and worked out amazingly. And I was like, I thank him so much because I think he's the reason I like finished school, because otherwise I would probably be like, this is dumb. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I, I end up doing really well and everything. But
Yeah.
prior to that, I would just act up because I'm like, I don't, what is the point of doing this when I'm getting 100 on the test? I don't even do my homework. I don't study. I don't, nothing. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
My brain doesn't work like that. And it bothers me to do those things. Like, even now, somebody's like, "Oh, we need to do this," and I'm like, "Okay." And then
But
they're
do
like, "All
I?
right, well, make sure you read this and write this out." I'm like, I can't do it. I don't
Yeah.
like doing that. It doesn't work for me. It
Yeah.
seems to mess me up. I don't know, but
And that's just how your brain works, and that's how you present yourself to the world. And one of the things a good teacher will do, like Mr. Riley does, is recognize the student where they're at and adapt their instruction to what the students need. Not And it can be really hard because a lot of schools, a lot of districts depend on funding, and funding says you have to do it this way.
this way, yeah,
And if you don't do that, I have a principal right now, thank goodness, who is really flexible and who understands that, my students aren't going to do things exactly the way that traditional schooling says they have to do it. So if I go to him and I say, I'm going to try it this way, like, when I taught my students how economy works by playing, I spent the whole class period with them playing Monopoly. And he came in, he saw it. And at other schools that I've taught at, they would have said, but what's your learning target? But
Yeah.
like, why aren't they sitting at their desks? Why aren't they taking notes? And he was like, did they get it? They got it? Good.
Good.
That was it. And he trusted that I
That's a
could do that.
beautiful
That's
thing.
that's exactly kind of what he did. He said, okay, this is clearly a distraction, and you're a distraction because of what how you learn or whatever. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove you from the class, and I'm gonna have you here, and I'm gonna have you just do assignments for me that you want to do, that
Yeah.
like that things that you are into, but you have to still do work.
Yeah.
But I'm not giving you this homework, and I'm not. It's like I swear, I just was like, this is dumb, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
doing. And then it's just stubbornness would. I was like, what is the point of this? And then you'll take your regents and all your tests that you need to take at the end.
Ah, the
Like you don't have to
regents.
sit in class and learn this stuff. You don't have to do the homework, but you do. You have to do this work of some
Yeah.
sorts of some kind of project. And I would
Mm-hmm.
do that and I'd be super happy because I'm like, oh, let me tell you about this. And
Yeah.
I'd do a whole presentation on World War II or Greek mythology or whatever the case. And he's like, just do that. Oh yeah. And you do your ones that you like. And as long as I'm doing work and I'm doing it, I don't have to follow this curriculum that I think is just doesn't make any sense. Why are you teaching? I already know this. And then boom, at the end, just take the regents. And boom, I take the readings at the end. Every time I get the highest, and you know what I mean. It was just that's just how my brain worked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like maybe if I like heard something one time, and it just stuck with me, and I just never had to. So it's like repetitive. I was like stop. I just don't.
Yeah.
Okay, like it just didn't work for me.
Definitely.
I don't know why, but
Because like that's just how it's funny. I often go back to thinking of like how school was originally set up. There was literally the factory model, and the way that like desks are set up in cute little rows, and like all the kids are like sitting with their hands folded in front of them and listening to the teacher. That was developed based on Henry Ford's assembly line method.
mm,
They were literally creating workers, factory workers who could sit at a line, who could stand at the line, pass the thing down to the next spot, and create a Model T.
gosh.
Like, and that's the basis of our the American education system. And it's like the brains just don't work like that. And you have to meet kids where they're at. I'm not like some criticism I get sometimes is like, well, then do kids can just do whatever they want whenever they feel like it? And I'm like, well, no, because if they do that, then, I've got chaos on my hands. Like,
Yeah.
but I still have to teach them the skills that come with life, whether that's like a lot of kids with dyslexia really struggle with what are called executive functioning skills, basically human skills.
Mhm.
So task initiation. If you get a task in front of you and you're sitting there going, how the heck do I start this thing? Planning, organization, like all those things, like, and especially my students with ADHD who don't understand that how time works.
Mm.
Essentially, time is like either right now or later. And
Yeah.
later
Yeah.
is a very nebulous, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, just to
Yeah.
bring Doctor
That's
Who in
right. Yeah.
here. It just doesn't exist. So I have to teach them these skills of how to like set yourself up for success in that sense. And I've got a couple of students who will only take notes a certain way because that's how they organize information in their brain. And I'm like, dude, do that. Great. If you have to type your notes, type your notes. If you have to do them in Cornell format, do them in Cornell format. You can do an entire rainbow of color codes as long as you are working on the process that works for you and you're still learning the content that we have. And if there's a side project you want to do, because the content that I'm teaching you right now, even though it's mandated, if it's not for you, give it to me a certain way. Like I have got two students who will give me a song every single project, but it helps them remember what's coming up for the test. And I'm
Hmm.
like, do it. give me the song, give me the song. And then lo and behold, everybody's clapping when our buddy Kendrick Lamar is coming up in the Super Bowl singing and saying, hey, this is what America's like right now. And everybody's going, yay, he made such a nice song. That's so great. And I'm like, you do realize that Kendrick Lamar is actually doing something right now, right? You do realize he's giving you a critical analysis of the state of the American government right now, right? And they're just like, yay.
It's dope. The people that can get that, because it's like half the people got it, half the people didn't get it, didn't want to get it, and it's hilarious to see that. But it doesn't take away from what was done. So those that know, they know. Those that are interested in knowing, saying they can look into it, they can research it. And it's something like that. I used to teach classes, to kids, and I would do African American history, and I teach them that, and as something to keep them grounded, keep them in the class, because everybody's not going to always want to be in class about something. So I try to keep it fun. So at the end, I do a history lesson on rap and everything like that, and I teach them the different types of raps and what certain raps actually mean, because I know you can really just listen to rap and completely miss a whole message. And I would show them a lot of songs that had messages that they didn't realize. They thought it was about one thing when it's actually a whole hidden message in it. I told them to listen to Oceans by Jay-Z. Is a song I always like to equate this song with as a good. I use it as a good example, because you listen to the song, you think he's talking about one thing, which he is, and then he's also has this other message in the song, and they're combined. And when I explain it to them, their mind is blown. And they're like, I didn't know that was going on. I was like, he does that all the time. And this is why he's considered one of the greatest rappers. But as a lot of these people don't even understand that. They're instant gratification. So there's different types of rappers. I'm going on a tangent, like we said we were going to. There's punchline rappers. A punchline rapper is somebody you get instant gratification. It's like or as, or I'm strong like an ox. Like it's like very easy to get
you
that.
Get your similes. Yes.
You get your similes and your metaphors. It's, that those are punchlines where you're like, oh yeah, he said I'm saying like I'm ill like a cancer patient. Like I get it. Like I get that.
Yes.
It's very easy. It's and it's dope, and to like it in something like that and use a simile. But Jay-Z's not that type of rapper. He does those things, but he's more of what's called a double entendre rapper, which is much harder to understand if you don't get the entendre. So he'll take something and he'll be talking about multiple things at one time, and you'll be like, oh, he's talking about Jules, and he's also talking about Black history, or what I'm saying, a certain subject matter. Nas combines it really well as well, or he does both. And he does stories and things like that. And I really love explaining that song to people and explaining his style. And then people are like, oh wow, I didn't know it was that deep. It is that deep. That's the problem. People who will tell you, oh, he's not even saying anything, they don't even know. They're not even using their shovels. They're not even trying to dig. They don't want to dig.
Look at you. You metaphored right there. They're not even using their shovels. I love that.
Well, I also am a rapper. Well, I used to.
Well, yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question though. Back to the Lord of the Rings. I wanted to know, being that we both teach.
Yeah.
In your opinion, in the verse, who is the best teacher out of all of the characters?
That's a great question.
That is a very good question.
Because there are a lot of teachers.
There are. And I've done a podcast episode, and I've written blog posts on Gandalf, because he's the entry point for me. Like he's the teacher, he's the mentor figure. He's the, like, if you think of Campbell's Campbell's wheel, Campbell's hero's journey cycle, he's the mentor figure. So he's that quintessential mentor figure. So I love Gandalf in the sense that one, he gives, like, everyone kind of relies on Gandalf a little bit, like to know what's going on and to give them the answers. But then he pieces out and says, nope, you can find the answer.
I was going to say, Gandalf kind of just drops a little jewels and leaves you with a riddle. And his method is like, learn it on your own.
Learn it on your own.
But I'm also going to give you a little mystery. I'm going to guide you. but I'm also gonna,
It's
they
like
will get
playing the
mad
hot
at
and
him.
cold game. You're
They
like
were like, "Yo,
hotter,
stop
hot,
talking in
hot,
riddles, my
colder,
guy. Like, what are you
colder.
talking about?
That's
Like,
exactly it. Yeah.
and he always keeps shit to himself. He's like, I'm not telling you. He's like, I'm not explaining why I know this.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you. Like Gandalf's
Yeah,
temper is hilarious.
it
It
is.
very much is. Yeah.
I do love though that moment though when in I think it's at the end of, it's either the end of Two Towers or beginning of Return of the I think it's the end of Two Towers where Pippin screwed up. He looked into the Palantir and now he's like, all right, we gotta go. Let's, get on the horse. We're going. And
Mm-hmm.
Pippin's asking him question after question after question. And on the outside, Gandalf's like, dude, why are you asking me so many questions? Like, can you please just like, save me from all these questions? Although, save me from a Tuke's curiosity because it's just going to drive me insane. But Pippin's like, you secretly enjoy this. I can tell. Like, I'm
Yeah,
finally getting this chance to
he
talk
would
to
answer
you
him
and
too.
get
My
all my
dad used to do that.
answers. But also, like, you're complaining about it, but you secretly loved showing off what you know. Like,
Yeah,
just be honest here. Because, like, the initial mission is he's supposed to guide the men and elves to defeating Sauron. He's not supposed to do it for them. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's a real balance as a teacher. Like there are times where you want to just be like, dude, kid, why don't you get it? I just want to shake you by the shoulders, be like, get this answer. Like the answer is 52. The answer is 52. Please get the answer. But that doesn't do anything for the student because then they're just going to, like you said, instant gratification. They want the answer, but then they don't know how to find the answer the next time around.
yeah. They have no clue how they got to that answer.
And they have no clue how they got to that answer. It's like there's no point in cheating on a test because then you don't know how to do that skill when you come upon it in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I love Gandalf. But there are also moments where I really love Tom Bombadil because he's teaching you without saying that he's teaching you. He's kind of like, he's chaos. Let's be honest, he's chaos.
I'm gonna say he annoys me more than anything. I would not use him as a good example. I'd be
You
like,
can't be in a classroom with Tom Bombadil.
I'm about to say I can't learn from him.
You can't learn from Tom Bombadil until you've interacted with him for a little bit and then you step away from him. Like if you are in a classroom with him, you're like, I don't know what this guy is talking about. Like he's bouncing all over the place. He looks like he's had way too much coffee.
When
But
we've
then
had that
later,
professor, we've all had that professor.
we've all had that professor who's just like, that like there's that meme of the guy from It's Always Sunny, and he's got all the strings in the background. He's like that's Tom Bombadil right there. He's like, I have all this knowledge and it's coming out in like different all these like crazy strings. But then you step back and you say, okay, so that's what he's talking about. So I don't have the patience to be Tom Bombadil's student, but I think he's a good teacher in the sense that he has so much knowledge and he also recognizes his own limitations. Like he knows that he can't hang on to the ring because he would lose it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have the attention span to hold on to the ring. But he also reminds everybody that this is what the world is in its infancy, at its purest, at its best. Like the old forest is the old forest on its own. And this is kind of what we have gotten away from over time. Let me see if I can think of some other teachers. I would love to go back to the Silmarillion at one point, and because Aule is often talked about as a teacher. Like he's the one who he teaches the dwarves, he teaches Feanor. I wonder like what his style is. Is it a all right, we're in a classroom, I'm gonna teach you how to hit a rock, or is it I'm gonna
I think he's the show. I think he's the
shower. Yeah.
Show it while doing because he loves to like he's gonna do it as he's teaching it, not tell you the methodology of it and then expect you to try it yourself without. I think he's doing it with you while he's teaching you, like, and might not even be saying anything, but
yeah.
Show one, do one, teach one.
Exactly. My answer he would probably be like a good like master apprenticeship kind of relationship, I'm guessing.
Yes.
I would want to look at like specific moments in the text to see what it says to try and support that. But like offhand, I would say, because like it's clear that people learn from Aule. Like Tolkien says, Aule was their teacher, or they learned from Aule. So there was something about Aule's characteristics that made him a good teacher.
Yeah.
And the fact that, he's kind of he's the Valar, he's the boss. So, who are you going to learn it from? You're going to learn it from the experts. You're going to learn it from the guy who knows how to form a rock.
I think he's the
It's
expert of experts. And then if we look at, what my answer is actually, students of his
yeah.
are all great teachers.
Yes.
All of them in their own right. And so my answer was going to be the dwarves of the Blue Mountains to me
Mm-hmm.
were the best teachers because whole nations and civilizations used their methods, like literally use their methods and were taught by them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not even like an argument or anything. It's like, yo,
Yeah.
they this the Sindar learned their smithcraft from them. Then we have Aol and Megalin, even though nefarious purposes, but they still learned from them, and they were the best at those things. Now in their whole race of elves, it's like that's crazy to think of, and they were just like they were very good at hey, this is how you do this, and now we armed you, and now you can arm yourselves and learn how to
Mm-hmm.
smithy and all these things, and these methods pass on because then when they go over in the second age, they're using what they learned. The Sindar elves that survive and move on. It's not only the Noldor that are there, and the Noldor
Right.
are also students of Aule as well, just like the dwarves. So Aule is an amazing teacher. But I think me putting him would be just too easy of an answer. So I
Well,
like the
yeah, but
dwarves. And Sauron is a very good teacher.
he is.
Sauron is
Yeah.
a super good teacher, and it tells you this multiple times. Every time he taught somebody something, it worked for them. Like it worked. He had his
Yeah.
own secret hidden agenda behind it, but it made them greater. It made them better. And he
Yeah.
taught people how to make the rings. He taught people lore. He taught the Numenorians a great many things. It says when he
Mm-hmm.
was, he taught them things, and they became a greater people. They became at their apex and at their zenith of their power.
Yeah.
Even though Al-Pharazôn was on the throne, Sauron ruled all from behind the throne. And so
Mm-hmm.
he teaches you these things, to get his way, but you're still,
He's still
the benefit
teaching.
is still there. Like he's still doing it. Like it's amazing. So those two really stand out to me, Aule
Yeah,
and I mean, the dwarves and Sauron, but
for
from
sure.
Aule.
Yeah, and it is funny sometimes. You have to think about, like, is the problem, if when there's a problem, like when someone teaches somebody something and then you get a negative impact. Like, for example, I was thinking about the Palantir at one point, and I'm thinking of the Palantir, using the Palantir as a teaching tool about social media,
Yeah.
because especially your kind of your For You page on TikTok, you get these tiny snippets and you are absorbing all this information from your For You page or whatever it is on your social media. I was trying to make some compare and contrast there. It didn't really go anywhere, but I was thinking, like, okay, so if I teach this kid how to analyze this literature, and then they take this literature and, like, because unfortunately people use the Lord of the Rings all the time to try and support their um
Personal.
personal, let me say, white nationalism.
Lim-
They'll use that to justify their hatred, and
Mhm.
it's like, oh no, I'm responsible for putting this text in this kid's hands. I'm responsible for teaching this kid. Is what they've learned from, like, is this, am I responsible for what they get out of it? And in some senses, yes, I am. I'm responsible. I will do everything I can to try and teach my students to be good humans. But at the end of the day, they are also who they are. And if they take the text and they see it in a way that either I don't or I fundamentally disagree with, I would rather they come away with the tools to analyze the literature. And I will tell them, no, I think you're wrong, because that's not how Tolkien works. And he actually has a litter. But a lot of times, at the end of the day, people are their own people. Sauron was his own person, his own Maiar, and he made poor choices. Does that mean that Aule is responsible for him and what he did? Or does that mean Melkor is responsible for who he is and what he did?
Mm.
And at some point, the teacher has to let go of the student and say, because, like, we can't make carbon copies of ourselves. That's what the factory model is for.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, we can give the information, we can do what we can with it, We could be a Saruman. We could say, I've got all this information, I've got all this power, I've got all this access. Maybe I can use it towards my own ends, or I can use it to try and make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it takes us a little while to get there. And other times, if I'm a student and I have a certain opinion, I'm going to fight back as your teacher and say, show me the evidence. I'm always going to say, show me the evidence. If you can justify it with evidence, I'll still disagree with you. And I will tell you why I disagree with you. But don't just tell me, like, I have a lot of students who struggle with backing up their opinions because they're so used to just saying a thing and somebody saying, yeah, 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 click the like. I agree with you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, show me the evidence. Tell me why. Where did you come to that? How did you come to that conclusion? Where did you get that? Why do you think this character is X, Y, and Z? I have had students who could tell me why they liked a character, but they couldn't tell me anything from the text. They just kind of had these traits like muddled up in their mind. I'm like, all right, yes, I agree. This character is cool. This character is this character is that. But I want a line from the text that shows me why this
Exactly.
character is cool. And if you can do that, there's only so much I can do as your teacher, but if you can justify yourself with evidence from the text and not a straw man analogy, like not random, like I love using the book Everything's an Argument. That's what it's called. It's a book about rhetoric. So you use, different ways to support your speeches, to support your arguments and say this is why this topic is important or this is why this thing is important. If you can back it up, it is what it is.
Yep. Yeah, these
Yeah.
kids today, boy. Whew.
Yeah, so what I really love here is that there's definitely been a focus on not the facts, but on how to get to them and like the process. And that is a life skill.
It
Like that's
is.
not just some rote knowledge thing. Like that's something that you take with you everywhere you go. And I
Mm-hmm.
just love that approach.
One thing that Gandalf is good at is that approach as well. Like
Mm.
he told he's teaching and he's saying he might not be convey it the best way with his riddles and stuff like that, but he's not just like yeah, leave Gollum alive. Like he's like yo man, Bilbo did this for a reason because his compassion is ultimately going to save everyone. So this is
Yeah,
why he didn't kill Gollum. You know what I'm saying? Have you
exactly.
even seen him? Think
Yeah.
about that. Like this pity is going to you know what I mean? Like and it's so funny because his learning from Nienna is
Mm-hmm.
what gave him pity and understanding and patience. And then so
Yes.
now he's not just willy-nilly just making decisions. He's like, okay, I understand. I get it. I am empathetic to why this person's like this or this is happening. And understanding that I can move accordingly. So now I'm just
Exactly.
not, it's not hate involved in it. It's just, okay, I understand this isn't, it doesn't have to be right. I understand it. You know what I mean? I feel for them, but let's rectify this. Let's fix this. Let's
Yeah.
move forward in a way to where it's not going to hurt you by doing it, and there's no evil going to come about it because it's not malice from you just hating something arbitrarily. Understand? Hey, man, Gollum is suffering too. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So he's going to have to get dealt with, obviously, but understand it's not just oh stab him just because you're mad because he
Yeah.
because he didn't do anything like Bilbo thought and I've always thought of it like when I was reading it Bilbo said no that's not fair because he was like yo stab him no that's not fair he didn't like that's not fair like he didn't nah I'm not gonna do that
Yeah.
and that's like a big lesson. And he's
It
like, yo,
is.
man, the pity of him, and he's lost and alone, and he's had this thing and it's gone, and I have it, and like this is not really like the right thing, but I got a self-preservation, but hey, let fate handle itself, and I don't have to be a pusher of fate and a doer of something wrong
Yeah.
to, you know, to make this come about. You know, what I mean, that's not the right
Yeah.
way to do it, and that's
Yeah.
why he was able to give up the ring because he didn't do what what Gollum did, which he didn't know, but Gollum strangling Deagle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
And
you
would
know,
the lesson have landed the same way if Gandalf had presented it in a different method? Like if Gandalf had spoken to Frodo in a different way, if he hadn't
Yeah.
said, okay, let's think about this for a minute, rather than, no, that's wrong. You're wrong. Bad Frodo.
Yeah.
If he had, if he had presented it in a different way, would the lesson have landed with Frodo? And would he have remembered it when he finally did encounter Gollum? Like, would he have had that moment of pity? These little moments add up, and you
Yeah.
see these moments add up throughout the Legendarium.
Many that live deserve death, and many that die deserve life. Can you give it to them?
Exactly. Can you do that, Frodo? Like,
Yeah,
actually
you
think
got to
about
think
it for
about
a
it. You got
minute.
to think about it. You can't just, you know what I mean? Like, like it's one thing a war is raging on, but like
Mm-hmm.
these two people, characters are here, and he is in such a wretched state, and he's like, it's just like just kill him. I feel like just because you're angry.
Mm-hmm.
No,
And I do wonder if Sam had been in there. Like, I know he's kind of lurking in the background because he's trimming the hedge at that moment. But what if we had sat Sam Gamgee down? Like, what if we had just picked him up, plopped him in front of Gandalf, and said, "Here, let's have this pity conversation." Would
it
he
would have
have
been
approached
very necessary.
Gollum differently?
As much as people love Sam and they champion Sam, which is I'm one of those people, that is his flaw. Tolkien says that is his flaw, is that
It
he
is.
doesn't have that pity or patience and for Gollum. And that is actually what turns Smeagol back to Gollum ultimately.
Yep.
But we kind of needed that to happen for
Yeah.
fate to do what it does. But if we're looking at it just like in a wide view of, what's the right thing, he doesn't handle that situation right. So as much as we champion him, people kind of forget that Sam is the reason Gollum is
Yeah.
Gollum at the end. He turns because he
He had a
had
moment.
a moment where he's like, "Yo, I'm, my master." Like he really was changing to a certain extent, and it was going. If you read the chapters
Yeah.
with Gollum and Sam and Frodo, it'll come across much clearer. Like him instantly his eyes go back, and it's like he's just has that malice and rage. They do a good job actually in the films as well of
Yeah.
displaying that as well, which they change things and many things get lost, but that is not one of them. They convey that very well. You can see, like he feels betrayed when the men by Frodo when the men grab him. He's like,
Yeah.
yo, man, like that's kind of the last straw. Like, but Sam always kind of on his ass all the time. He's like, yo, man, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
I will say there are so many moments that I love talking about with students simply because I love to see their reactions. That moment where Gollum is reaching out, or Smeagol is reaching out, he's about to touch Frodo when they're asleep. Like, he has this moment of compassion. I was reading it aloud with my students one day. And then when Sam woke up and was like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, why are you touching?" They literally screamed. They're like, "No!" They had this moment of, he was so, like, they were championing for Smeagol. Like, they were like,
Oh, I love
"Buddy, you
that.
can do it.
Oh.
You can do it." And
Believe in you.
then crash. They were so
Crash.
mad at Sam. Like, they were ready to go to war over this moment. There was just a collective no. And it's so funny to see, like, kids, man, they will make you laugh.
They
Um,
do. And they engage with this material so differently than we do. And
they
it's so
do.
amazing and so pure. I love
Yeah,
it.
I was
absolutely.
reading at one point, one of my students asked me, I read the end of Two Towers, and I was kind of like, I don't understand why everybody's so happy that this guy, or like, what's going on at the end of the Two Towers at Helm's Deep? And I'm like, okay, I think I understand why you're not jazzed about this, because you didn't read it aloud. Let's read it aloud. So
Yeah.
I get to the end where everybody is like, "It's Erkenbrand, it's Erkenbrand." And I just hyped it up. Like, I
Yeah.
am like yelling. I'm in the middle of my
That is
office.
crazy
It's crazy. And like,
because
I
that's one of
hyped
my
it up.
favorite characters. And
Right.
everybody wants to skim over him. Go ahead. I'm sorry, but
No, you're good. No, it's good
I'm about to
because,
go
like,
in. I'm about to go hammer when you're done.
the student was like, I mean, okay, so he wrote in, he saved the day. Yay, what's going on? I'm like, hold the phone. Then I read it aloud. I hyped it up. Like, I had to like stand away because this was an online class. I had to stand away from my microphone because I was just yelling at the top of my lungs. And I just like, it's Gandalf, it's Erkenbrand, yay! Because this is like a big poetic moment that, we often see this in like in old English poetry, where like this guy comes in, he saves the day, and everything's great. And like, I'm hyping it up, and I've got all this energy. I needed a huge drink of water after I was done. And then the student was like, okay, I get it now.
Oh.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
like there you
see,
go. Like,
sometimes you got to read Tolkien aloud.
and you gotta the
Mm.
context of things are said so often in Tolkien that people just kind of like, oh, and I hype Erkenbrand up, and I'm like, I wish he was in the movies, and
Right?
I'm like, you could have definitely put him in the movies, and they the fact that they liken him to Helm Hammerhand. Like things happen at the fords.
Mm-hmm.
The third the fourth marshal of the Riddim is slain of the West, and he Erkenbrand is and now it's his responsibility. And they're like, oh, Erkenbrand is he's a great dude.
Yeah.
They say it like he Erkenbrand, and they're hype off of it. You're like, oh, why
Like,
are they
okay, so
hype?
it's just this random dude. Okay,
Yeah,
Tolkien's introduced another random dude. Why do we have another random dude? We're like, no, no.
no,
That's
listen
this
how
big
they're
hero
talking about
moment.
him. Listen how they're speaking about this person that you don't know. That's
Yeah.
what example, also another example, Prince Imrahil.
Yep.
When they're coming in, they're like, yo, the people are like, yo, Prince Imrahil, like, yo, this dude, like, yo, even Forlong the Fat, like they're like, yo, Forlong, like it's the people. You're supposed to catch the context from them. Like read it like you're there, like you're one of
Mm-hmm.
them, like, and then you'll see, and then the likeness of Hammerhand and him, he's very da da da. So when he comes back, it's like, wait, we're in Helm's Deep. Like Helm is this great. Clearly, there's statues of him, and that this horn of like. So if he is the likeness of him, when he comes, it's about to be some shit. And he came
Mm-hmm.
with Gandalf went and got him, and they like it's a oh, like come on, like what are we talking
We are
about?
saved.
Come
We are
on, like this
saved.
Erkenbrand, man. What are you talking
Yeah,
about? What they've been saying now is true. And
exactly.
it makes him. And I think they leave him to guard Rohan back when they take everyone. I think
Yeah.
he gets left because he is that guy. Like, yo,
He's
you stay.
trustworthy. They
Yeah,
trust him
yeah.
and they know him. Yeah.
So
Sometimes
I
like
love.
you have to read it aloud in order to get it. And I think that's a skill that a lot of that we're kind of recognizing as teachers again today. There was a big movement for teaching reading and sustained silent reading. And people were like, all right, if you can read silently, if you can read silently to yourself, that means you're a good reader. There's like, I could go on like a 2 hour tangent of how teaching reading has been done in the past. Like I've got a whole thing about it on my podcast and on my blog. But we're realizing now because we are verbal oral creatures because our brains are not hardwired to read, we need language and we need speech because of oral storytelling, um, that superseded our ability to read. And so now in order to help teach kids how to read, we need to read aloud. We need to read aloud, as whether it's a story, whether it's a science text, whatever it might be, because we have to make those connections between the squiggly lines that are on the paper and the oral speech and language that we are born understanding and knowing from infancy. The first thing we do when you have a baby, you talk to that baby, you sing to that baby, you goo goo gaga over that baby. That's all part of learning how to be a human and learning how to process language and tell a story. So with Tolkien, reading him aloud and getting him like and really because he is a storyteller. He bases a lot of his work on Anglo-Saxon poetry and on those meters and those rhythms that only come from being read aloud. So I love what Corey Olsen does when he gets people to like act out certain scenes, whether it's for the Silmarillion or for Lord of the Rings. I like to do that with my students too. I'm like, all right, let's pick it up, let's read the book together, let's act it out, and then oftentimes like the campus I work on now has a set of woods in the background. One of my students was like, let's reenact the Battle of Gondolin right now, and I'm like, bet, let's go. We just picked up sticks, just started, reenacting the battle. He's like, we got dragons over here. I've got, the elves up there. And I'm like, okay, this is good. But like, if you act it out, there's so many different pathways that you're literally, your brain is fire at that moment. Your brain is fired
Yeah,
and you're
I
processing the text in
love it.
another way.
I love how in the Lord of the Rings, um, poetry and song
Mm.
is history.
It
and
is.
it's how they learn most of their history, and they keep great deeds through them. And that is one of the things that drew me also with The Hobbit. So one thing I always like to say is when you are reading The Hobbit and you're in Bilbo's house,
Mm-hmm.
Bilbo misses it at first, but the dwarves completely told him everything. And Bilbo is just, because he's so frantic and panicked, he
Yep.
didn't hear a word they said. He's just like, "What? Like I got
Mm-hmm.
something. What? Like I know we're going somewhere." Because they're like, "We, you
We
didn't
told you.
hear. We
We told
literally
you the
told you
story.
everything." The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells, in places deep where dark things sleep, and hollow halls beneath the fells. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is literally a whole story of literally the history of those people in the Lonely Mountain and what happens when Smaug comes
Yep.
and their downfall and how they feel
It's
and
all there.
everything. It's amazing. It is literally amazing. And you're literally when he says that, you go and you're like, oh
You're just
shit.
like, yeah, yeah, it's a nice song. That's pretty cool. And you're like Bilbo, and you're just kind of like entranced by the fire, and you're
Right,
like,
like it's a song. You go back
it's
and
a nice
listen after
song.
he says that. He's like, yo, he definitely said the whole thing. He said
Like
the
the
whole
terms of the contract were right there.
like it's amazing. And then from there, you're like, okay, let me listen a little more intently to what
Mhm.
they're singing about. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's
Yeah.
like, wow, the when Frodo is in Rivendell and he's talking to Gimli, and then he's he sees Bilbo, and then he sees Aragorn like talking, and then he's like, oh, I'm finishing the song. Bilbo's finishing the song. He's like, what poem, what song are you finishing? And then you're like, you listen to it and you might not catch it at first, but then you're like, wait, what is he talking about?
It's
And you
Arundel.
listen, it's talking about Eowyn. And then you're like, everything comes into focus when you read the Silmarillion.
Mhm.
He's talking to
Mm.
this man. He's saying a poem to this man about his dad. He doesn't want to mess it up.
But he's also
And
kind of being cheeky there too.
As
He's
Bilbo does.
Aragorn is like
as
laughing at
Bilbo
him because
does.
he's like, you're telling this dad dude about his dad. It's hilarious. It's like
Like you do
you're
realize
singing him a song about his
He
dad.
was
It's
there.
hilarious.
he was
It's
there.
like
He was
like
there
it's
when it was written.
hilarious.
Oh, wait, wrong fandom.
Yo, so it's like,
Yeah.
but it's a way to learn, and Sam and Frodo say it so many times because that's how Sam knew about Gilgalad,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, oh, I heard about him, and he recites the song, and
Yeah.
then he's
Gilgalad
like,
is
oh
Sylvan
shit,
King.
that's the okay.
Oh, so it's that
I know that
guy.
history. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I may have not had something to tie it into, and I didn't know that these things were connected, but I know that history. Gilgalad
Mm-hmm.
was an elvish king of whom the harp is sadly sing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
now, oh, he's that king. He knew it
And
already. He knew the history.
he is telling it to a descendant of Beren and Luthien.
Yes.
He is telling it to someone who is literally a reflection of the Beren and Luthien myth,
Yeah.
and doing it all over again with his girl Arwen. Like
Yeah.
Mm.
it all comes full circle. I had another really cool moment in my Hobbit class once where your analysis, your what you're talking about Bilbo listening to that song in the beginning. We got to towards the end when after Smaug had fallen and the dwarves are singing a new song,
Yeah.
and my student was like, hang on. She read the poem aloud to herself, the one at the end, and she realized that it was almost a literal reflection of the song in the beginning. This kid's
Yep.
11 years old, and she was drawing parallels on her own from the first song to the next song. She was really this particular student was really good at pointing out these little tiny details, especially in words. Like she really latched on to the description of hobbits with like long brown clever fingers.
Hmm.
Like she noticed this pattern, like the great green dragon, long clever fingers. Like she was literally hunting for those in the text. And I'm like,
Hmm.
child, you brilliant creature.
Love to
She was
see it.
amazing. But
Love
like
to see it.
it's great. And she saw these parallels. And so we spent a whole class just looking at those poems side by side. Where were the differences? Where were the similarities? And what now that we have this context of this is what happened in the beginning, now that Smaug is gone, what are they latching on to?
Mm.
As now they're like,
Now
oh,
they have it. Now we
now they
have
have
this.
it. what do we do
What are
now?
we doing? What are we doing
What
now?
do you do when the quest is over? When your whole life is about the quest, what do you do when you it's like Inigo Montoya. Okay, I spent my whole life seeking revenge. Now that it's over,
Yeah.
what do I do with the rest of my life?
Now, I'm going to ask you three questions.
Go
As
for it.
before we get out of here, I'm going to ask you three questions, and I want you to give me your best answers. And the answers can be from anywhere in the entire Legendarium, Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales. The characters that you give can be from anything in the Tolkien universe. It doesn't have to be from Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. All
I'm
right.
on it.
If you could marry
Mm.
anyone from the Tolkien Legendarium, who would you marry?
Mm-hmm.
Who would you have protect you?
Mm-hmm.
And who would you fight?
I would marry Elrond because I want that library.
That is a that
Mm.
is
He's a good
Like,
choice. I think it's
that's a
the
very
first
good
time.
choice. Elrond is a
he's a
good dude,
good,
man.
Mm.
like, I like him.
He's very
I
wise, man.
love Robert Aramayo's portrayal of him. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm, you know what? Now that I say that, I pretty much drool over Lloyd Owens' Elendil. So
Don't we
maybe he'll be
all? I
like, maybe
mean,
I'll be in like a polyamorous, arrangement there. But I love that library. Like Beauty and the Beast, that was my Disney film growing up because
Mm,
that library. Ooh. I need my girl Eowyn to protect me because
nice.
if I just what now I'm like I need a full army with I need like all my shield maidens. I need Eowyn, I need Olwen, um I
We were
need
just talking
Hera.
about Olwen yesterday. I could never remember her name just because it's
well, it's a
new.
new
So
one.
It's
it'll
Yeah.
take
new.
a little bit.
They also don't really say it all that often. I
Yeah.
noticed in the film. I'm like, no, I need to know her name so I can cosplay as her one day because she's my girl. I love
Yeah.
her. I have such beef with Two Towers Grima.
I literally knew you were gonna say Wormtongue. I was literally mouthing Wormtongue. I was like, she's
Oh,
gonna say
wow,
Wormtongue.
you knew that's where she was going. Okay.
Everybody hates Wormtongue, bro,
I
as they
mean,
should.
yeah.
I do feel bad for him by the time we get to him in the Scouring of the Shire. But there's just something about the slimy way he manipulates Theoden because it's not it's underhanded and it's also like it's just the lowest of the low kind of manipulation to prey on somebody's fear. Like
Fear and age and
he didn't use magic. He did a full he if you want to like compare it to Shakespeare, he did a full Iago on Theoden's like Othello. Like he all he had to do was just whisper a couple of things in his ear, and that's really easy to do, which is scary. And I'm just like, you son of a
he's the
bitch.
Plantier of Minas Tirith without being the Plantier of Minas Tirith. He
Exactly.
preyed on his fears. And one thing about you know, Wormtongue that's really crazy is I know what they do this backwards in the movies, but Theoden it loves Wormtongue.
Yeah.
He actually he's like, yo, you used to be a good man. Like, don't kill
He
him. But
trusted him.
where in the book, with the movie,
Mm.
Aragorn is the one like, no, we don't. Nah, it's vice versa. Like Theoden's like, nah, let him get on the horse. Like I love him. Like he's like my guy. Like I don't. He didn't want to kill him, and then it ended up biting him in the ass at the end because obviously in Helm's Deep and he whatever. But he's it's his people's. Like you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So that betrayal it hits even much more. You
Yeah.
know.
It was slow, it was insidious, it was and like it's true because like even now we have like modern reflections of this of like the things in the media slowly creeping up on us and hitting us and things in like our friends, sometimes the wrong friend or the wrong like phrase can just hit you the wrong way, and
Crazy.
he's so real, and that's what makes me so mad.
Yeah.
He's like, why didn't you if you had like cast a fireball or like I don't know, it was just so
Yeah,
I
it
think
does.
I think I'd beef with Grima because he's not fantastic in any way, and I'm like, I need you to like, yeah,
The limits.
it's hard for me to explain, but
The
like I'm like
lie
what
is
you're
so
doing
much
is so
more realer
real.
and thicker. Like it's like, oh man, you really are slime ball. Like you're not even
Yeah,
using wizardry. Like
like
your tongue is really crazy. Like you're really
exactly,
wild.
you're
You're
really
wicked.
wild.
Like you're really wicked.
Yeah,
So that's a great choice right there. So
yeah.
um thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. Like before we go,
Thank you
Callie
guys.
always likes to leave us with some gems. She always likes to be a teacher of sorts at the end. She's
Love the
pulling the
gems.
strings, but sometimes she comes into the forefront. She learns us some things. So we're gonna let Callie do that. But it has been amazing to talking to you.
Thank you.
Where can we
Thanks for
Anything
find
before
you
having
you
and
go,
me.
my friend?
everything you've got going on? Because we didn't even talk about the fact that you have a podcast and
Oh
that you
my
have
God.
all this
Oh yeah,
amazing
we've been
things.
talking about teaching all over.
Okay, so I have a podcast, Teaching with Magic. It's on Spotify mostly, but you could also find it on YouTube. I do a lot of interviews. I talk about Tolkien, but I also talk about sometimes I'll talk about the Harry Potter world. So I talk to other teachers, and I talk about teachers within. I talk about Star Wars a lot. I'll talk about Tolkien. I'll talk about ways that other teachers are bringing fantasy and science fiction into their classrooms, kind of as a way to think about like ways that other teachers who might want to do this can bring, their love of Tolkien or their love of Star Wars into the verse, into their own classrooms, because, spread the knowledge, spread the wealth. I've got a blog on subs. I'm mostly writing on Substack now.
Mm.
I do have a WordPress site called Teaching with Magic. I've also got a Patreon. I'll post my episodes, and I'll post. I've been working on some curriculum handouts. So I have a packet on The Hobbit for sale on Patreon. It's a collection of activities for teachers to do with their students. So it's not a curriculum per se. It's like, okay, so you're teaching The Hobbit and you're thinking of things to do with your students. Here's a collection of things to do with your students, so that you don't have to follow X, Y, and Z. You don't have to follow a specific
Oh,
path. You can be flexible, and you can decide which of these activities works with your students, including, as I referenced in the live stream yesterday with Brie Crossroads. There's a riddle. There's a riddle activity, so
Mm.
you can make your own riddles with your students after reading, but you can create your own riddles in the dark. So there's a chance to talk about poetry. There's a chance to talk about like double entendres. There's a chance to talk about like all the different ways that you can create a riddle using riddles in the dark. And another fun activity I like to do is I like to have my students decode the letters on the map, on Thorin's map.
Nice.
So I kind of present it as a puzzle, like how do you figure out which letter is which? Take a look at the author's note in that Tolkien wrote in The Hobbit.
Hmm.
Everything you need is right there.
Yeah.
But I've had students like zone in on this decoding activity. It's so much fun.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, podcast, Substack, um, WordPress, and my Patreon. So I'll gladly, yeah, I know I'm kind of
that's awesome,
That's
though.
all right.
place.
That's all right.
I'm trying. Yeah, I'll gladly share those details with you guys, so that
Yes,
if you want to
yeah.
find me,
If you
there
look
I
in
am.
the episode description for this, I will put all the links so that you do not get lost or miss any one of those fantastic resources. That's amazing. Thank you so much again, Elise. This was
You're very
a really
welcome.
fun conversation. Like I knew that you would be so much fun to talk to, but
Thank you so much for having me, you guys. I really appreciate it.
It's been a great
yeah.
time. Great conversation. Thank you.
All right, so closing off the episode, we have some tips on how to argue effectively and respectfully.
Mm,
So
Hmm.
tip number one is to listen actively. If you're listening and all you're doing is working out how you're going to reply, you're not actually listening to the person. So
mm,
do that listening part. Tip number two is to stay curious. Our brains experience a change in chemistry when we become curious, and that helps you learn better and to retain more information. Tip number three is do not attack with your points. Make your point, but you don't have to attack the person with it. It puts them on the defensive and puts them in a space where they're not ready to accept what you're saying.
mm,
Tip number four, coming off of that, is to be friendly and respectful. And not, don't attack the person's point and also don't attack them personally, right? Stick to the argument, stick to the facts. Tip number five is to ask open-ended questions, which encourages interaction and discussions. And no matter where that conversation goes, everybody who's involved will have a more enriching experience. Tip number
Mm-hmm.
6 is to, again, argue the facts, not your feelings on the facts. Tip number 7 is to ask how and not why. So if you ask someone why they're right, it again puts them on that defensive. But if you ask them how they got to that conclusion, you're asking them what was the process, what went into your argument, and then from there you can start to like deal with it from there. And then tip number 8 is know how to concede when appropriate, because and gracefully when appropriate. So
Agree on all of
Agree.
those points, Kelly, for sure.
As a ardent arguer, I definitely agree with those things, and there's something I learned throughout the years, and I'm trying to get better at because I grew up in an arguing family, and
Yep,
so
yep. As someone who grew up in an Italian family where argument is our love language, yes,
yeah,
yes.
absolutely. It love, but it's like you ain't going. I'll argue with you into the ground, but learn to over time that there's a way to go about it. So thank you so much for those tips, Callie. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Elise, for being here. I love the conversation. I love your teaching style. I love your enthusiasm and your energy. It's awesome. Your students are absolutely lucky to have you. Keep
So
doing what
lucky.
you're
Yeah.
doing, and come back to my class so I can teach you.
Heck, heck yeah. Hey, the students, teachers are make the best. Teachers should make the best students. They don't always, but they should make the best students because you're never done learning. You're never
Never.
done. Doesn't matter
Absolutely.
how
Learn
many
something new every
credentials
day.
you have. Doesn't matter if you were like Tolkien, you're the Bosworth, whatever professor of Anglo-Saxon. You never stop learning.
Yeah.
That's what makes you one a good teacher. So heck yes, I'm coming back to your class someday. You bet.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
All
All right,
right.
guys. So that's the end of the podcast, episode 60. Make sure you tune in for episode 61. All right, guys.
Y'all
Out
are
of
the
here.
best.
Peace.
Bye-bye.